Logan?
I've got something from Sarah Bowen for you, and I didn't want to crush that.
Did she pass it on to
Oh.
me?
Is that
how we get things from one side of the building to the other?
Is it a Tic Tac wrapper?
I thought it was a Starburst wrapper, but I don't know.
She's adorable.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she handed me one as well. Mine is more blue, but...
Very cool. Thank you. That's funny.
Sure.
Nice to see you. Is your day been productive?
The week, yeah. I just had a couple today, but most of them because both of the committees for veterans were Monday. Mm-hmm. That was our busy day.
Good.
And two folks basically said, I'm tired, I'm going to stay home. So I was like, okay.
Oh, your people.
Yeah.
No. I thought you were talking about legislators for a second.
Oh, no.
Is that an option? Because I would take it.
No, I told people,
just kidding.
I just need you to be there, and people believe this is important if they see more people behind it. And
that is the case. I think that you'll find that most people see any sort of veterans issue as important, but you are correct. The more people that are there, yes, yeah. I get it.
So I'm here as one of your constituents. I wanted you to know what I'm doing. Senator Boshart has been really supportive, and her office has been really helpful in guiding me in the right direction. And I had a meeting this morning with Senator Manning, and yeah, things are looking really good. But the nuts and bolts are I'm advocating and lobbying and doing everything I can for civil rights for military families. You might not know.
On a state level?
Yes.
Okay.
My experience is federal. I was in the Army for 6 years, deployed to Iraq in 2004, and then I got out and started at school. When I got to the degree I was most excited about in theology at Duke, I started seeing things that I shouldn't have been seeing. As a student, I'm sure relatively intuitive. Veterans are typically older, they have more experience, more trauma, and it's just a different experience. And things I was shrugging off as a student, I eventually got a second degree and came back to it, and I began working as a TA. And my first section at Duke, I taught undergrad elsewhere and gone through the PhD application process, etc. But when I came back as a TA, I was given an evening section with half the number of students, and I would have accepted that without a second thought. But I learned that semester that I'd become a father, and I didn't want to have to choose between work and bedtime. So I talked to who I was supposed to talk to at Duke, and I discovered very quickly that I don't have the rights that I'm supposed to, and some of the rights that I should have, I don't have.
When you say supposed to, can you expand on that?
Yep.
And when you say supposed to?
The first law I discovered is called VEVRA, the Vietnam Era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act of 1972. Granted, or it's supposed to require federal contractors to implement affirmative action plans for veterans. When it comes to enforcement...
All veterans, not just Vietnam veterans?
No, not all veterans.
Okay. Oh,
some veterans.
Interesting. Okay.
If you are a peacetime, non-disabled veteran, you are not protected under VEVRA.
Peacetime, okay.
It's about 20% or 4 to 5 million veterans. You can discriminate totally lawfully as an employer at the federal level. Then, as the snowball started rolling and shit started to hit the fan, I discovered that VEVRA is actually, it doesn't really matter. It's written so poorly that when a veteran took the DOL to court, the retired Justice Sandra Day O'Connor called it no law at all because it didn't create a meaningful standard by which to apply judicial oversight. So it doesn't matter what the bill says if they can't force
compliance.
Yeah, prosecution. Prosecutorial discretion is heavily favored, I'll say. But in addition to that, the DOL, I FOIA'd their enforcement data, and from 2000 to 2020, they received more complaints from veterans than any other class. But to veterans, they sent a disproportionately low number of findings of merit. They basically said, we don't believe veterans at a statistically significant rate. They refer people frequently to the EEOC, but the EEOC does not protect veterans. Housing and Urban Development does not protect veterans. And some rights that we do have are just simply not enforced. I eventually discovered that the Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009, named after Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr., included an entire section that extended similar but weaker protections to service members and their families up to 5 years after discharge. How that shakes out is, for example, one of the most provocative that I found. In Cincinnati in 2016, an American citizen had a detailed plan to behead a soldier, his wife, and child, and then blow themselves up at a nearby police station. That service member and the family were sequestered and protected. The guy was then pled out on domestic terrorism charges. In every instance that I found where a service member was targeted on behalf of their military service, they would apply domestic terrorism charges. It's easier to get a conviction or a confession, but the HCPA is explicit in that it protects entire communities, not individual victims. Matthew Shepard and James Byrd did not have their murderers convicted under hate crimes. 3 of the 4 were executed, was under hate crimes. It's for everybody in that community that's targeted. The Department of Justice, after HCPA was passed in October of 2009, within 8 months, the Albany Legion Hall, Post 10, was burnt to the ground on July 4th.
Yep, I remember you saying something. Okay.
The federal government
What
never
year was
applied to 2010. It was less than a year after the HCPA.
Okay.
The ATF was involved, but no federal charges were brought. The guy again pled out. Domestic terrorism is not mutually exclusive from hate crimes. The KKK is a domestic terrorist organization. There's no reason the DOJ should not enforce that, but by not enforcing it, they are depriving 20 some odd million service members and their families and veterans from their civil rights. They're being denied equal protection under the 14th Amendment.
So talking specifically about the American Legion incident in Albany, is there any recourse now for something that happened? So what should have happened? What could have the American Legion received, whether it's money or justice, that they didn't?
I think had the federal enforcement applied the law, it probably would have gotten more sympathy, not only for the post itself, but for the community that HCPA is supposed to protect. They took it on the chin because their rebuild was more expensive than the building was worth to the insurance, and they're still underwater. That's the talk of the veteran community in Albany. They're always trying to fundraise. They don't have the same support they did before, and if we believe what we say about veterans, that should have received more attention. And we could have been talking about military civil rights 14 years on now. But everything I'm going to give you and have given you is a result of my time on my phone, on my laptop as a stay-at-home dad, burning time for the kids to go to sleep, and then starting to put 2 and 2 together. I have 2 research degrees. When I started a VEVRA investigation at Duke in 2016, and I learned, before I discovered O'Connor's decision, that the DOL's enforcement agency will piss in the bucket and call it lemonade. Because they can, and they don't have the money to do it, just like Boley doesn't have the money to enforce laws here in the state.
Were you listening to my committee this morning?
No, I don't think I was.
We talked about that. I got really heated because wage claims.
Yeah.
Because they're over wage claims. They have decided that because they can't get through them all, they are going to dismiss all wage claims if the earner makes $53,000 or more a year.
Yeah.
What?
That. Yeah.
So you're just going to dismiss them?
Yeah, it's arbitrary.
$53,000.
HCPA, if I remember correctly, included certain grants to subordinate agencies. I have an email drafted to Ron Wyden's office because we're talking about amending the federal stuff. And one of the questions I'm getting ready to send is, if VEVRA gets rewritten, amended, whatever, is there some way to allocate funds, to raise money, to allocate funds so that enforcement agencies for civil rights matters get the same kind of resources as criminal law enforcement matters under HCPA? But one of my kind of low-hanging fruits is to just raise awareness of it.
Okay.
I've been holding these meetings I call Military Improvement Association, named after 1955 Montgomery Improvement Association, formed by Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy. Ralph was a World War II platoon sergeant. Martin Luther King was too young to serve when the draft was up for him. And to this day, Martin would have more rights than Ralph. They passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and Ralph later wrote in his autobiography, they thought that they were done. Their statutory obstacles were cleared, So they started turning toward economic justice. April 67, King Kim comes out against the war in Vietnam, saying at the Riverside Church in New York that the business of war sends men home from dark and bloody battlefields physically handicapped and psychologically deranged. In June of 15, right before I accepted a contract to TA at Duke, I was put on the cover of Christianity Today magazine with the title, War Torn. The subtitle, How a Psychiatrist is Deploying Hope to Soul-Scarred Veterans. And I and the psychiatrist, who was my academic advisor at the time, knew that I and other student vets at Duke had actually influenced how he did his work at the VA. And that it was backwards to make it about civilian savior story when it was, we were sidelined in our own story. And that's happened again and again. Once I was able to see what I at first wasn't able to call bias, harassment, discrimination, now I see it everywhere. I have a book for you since you're my local rep.
Oh, nice.
My most recent book I got real excited about. And much of this material came out of researching for the last 2 chapters. I'll earmark it for you. Hachette is a Big 5 publisher. They really wanted this book under a conservative editor, Kate Hartson. She published Triggered by Don Trump Jr., a bunch of other stuff, and she picked it up. And after it got picked up, the publisher, the main editor, got changed, and it was a woman who was really progressive. And magically, my editor disappeared. I never got their contractual obligation to provide an editorial review. They badmouthed me to other industry professionals because I didn't fit the paradigm of, I don't know, but I can't find an attorney to explore contract or libel law, because when we say veterans' rights, we usually think of discharge upgrades or disability claims. And civil rights for military families is, for a lot of people, just counterintuitive for some reason. And the only reason I'm here now instead of several years ago is my family, we've been bouncing around, but Oregon looks like we'll be here for a while, and I'm picking up where I left off. And yeah, now both of our girls are in school, and so this is now something that I need to get done so I can get the other stuff I want to do. But that's
First
what I'm
off,
doing.
how old are your girls?
5 and 8.
Okay.
Last month.
I've got
Yeah.
3 that are 17, 19, and 22.
Oh, so
They-
they're at most of
They
them are
grow
at
up.
house. Yeah.
They grow up. Yes, they grow up fast. So
I'm real glad I got to be a stay-at-home. Very tiring, but it's something that they'll never, yeah, something that I didn't anticipate being
where do they go
privileged
to
to be in.
school?
Oak Grove,
Oh, nice.
very quickly.
So you're in North Albany?
Yeah,
Mhm.
we met in North Carolina at Duke, and I started teaching. I took a second degree in Scotland, came back, and that's when things started happening in 16. And very quickly, Duke is a big employer, and friends who were even in our wedding party were unable to support us in the face of the power and influence that Duke wielded. And we had just some really bad experiences, and the job market for her, anywhere with a good seminary is going to have a lot of good seminarians. And she works as a hospital chaplain in Lebanon and also in Albany, and she takes calls in, sometimes in Corvallis, but not usually. And yeah, we felt run out of North Carolina. We found this beautiful house in Maryland that I worked on, started doing some advocacy there because I was about an hour from the Capitol. That was 160.
Totally different ballgame than.
And that house didn't work out, so we moved within the county to this beautiful Victorian farmhouse that our youngest, a couple days after her first birthday, found a chip of lead. And then we lived in a basement for 10 months. The state remediated, and we came back. We thought, do we want to stay here where that happened? And we decided ultimately to go back to California, where we grew up and where our parents, some of our family was. Way too expensive, way too high, fast-paced. She worked at Mission Viejo Hospital, and it too many infant traumas and child traumas, and like a friend of ours from Corvallis had been trying to get us.
I was going to say, enter Albany, Oregon.
Yeah, and we were like, we're tired, can't stay in California, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we came up in January of 22. We liked it. We came back in April, found a house. This is our 4th VA home loan, and it was just really easy and fluid. And
That's amazing.
yeah, so
22 is right before kind of those interest rates started hiking.
yeah.
I mean, it really is the last year that there was like, what, 3-4%, and then it just started climbing. So
yeah.
I bet you feel a little bit fortunate there.
Our last house was Walkersville, Maryland. It was a 3.25,
Mm-hmm.
and then we were renting in California, and here it's a 6.25. But yeah, we have friends who are like, we'll just never move because we'll never get those interest rates
never
again.
get it again. And listening about your wife with too many, my sister's been an ER nurse here at Salem Hospital, right over here, and she's been in the ER for 20 years.
Huh.
And when she says sometimes it seems like it happens in series. If there's child trauma, that just gets her.
Yeah.
Or abuse, child abuse. Oh, it eats you up. And so I can sympathize, not empathize, I can sympathize with that because I hear my sister, that's the only time she ever questions her work is when you get too many child abuse in a short period, because that just eats at you.
Yeah.
Just eats at you.
It got to the point where I couldn't. There's a 6-year-old boy who was starting first grade, and like he was so looking forward to riding his bike, and his parents did all the right things, but it's Southern California, and some idiot didn't stop enough or something at a stop sign, and his one parent was in a bike right behind him, another was in the car. It's just a reminder of how fragile and precious life is. But yeah, it was too much. I told her it's like combat deployment. You can do a couple as long as you have some dwell time, but I certainly couldn't do it as a career. She visits the ER frequently,
Yeah, I'll bet.
It's a little bit more well-rounded experience.
And Lebanon, Albany is going to be a lot different than a Portland area hospital or something. So I'm super glad to hear that. Hopefully our paths cross at some point. So as far as this, what I'm seeing a lot of is what you're trying to do is federal.
Concurrently, I'm working both sides.
Is there something that we can do on the state side?
Yes.
Okay.
The lowest
hanging fruit. And did you meet with either Evans or Lewis or Graber?
Yes, not Graber.
Okay, Evans and Lewis. I'm just thinking of people
Lewis
that
is
are...
tomorrow. Evans is tomorrow.
Okay.
Representative Tran and Heeb are hopefully the House. I'm hoping to potentially stand up a comprehensive military civil rights bill. Unlike federal, there aren't many military civil rights at the state to amend.
But I feel like you can do preferences.
Veterans preference is tricky, in part because BOLI and enforcement.
Okay.
And I only know that LBCC seems to be out of compliance, but the law itself seems to be relatively not soundproof.
Or EEOC on a state level.
Somebody mentioned possibly amending the protected classes statute, wherever it is, to add military and veteran.
Yeah.
One of the difficulties, California did that. 2013, Assembly Bill 556 added military and veteran status to the Civil Rights Department prerogative. That was when Vice President Harris was AG. I had to file a complaint against a professional organization, and when I went in just to start, the complaint intake form did not include military and veteran status. And this was, it was this year. 11 years after military became protected status, we still haven't even been added to the intake form. Making that top level change doesn't always create meaningful difference on the ground. Not that it's not productive, there has to be some kind of enforcement thing, which BOLI, as we can tell, is already having some difficulty meeting demand. And whether that's education for what isn't qualified under the bill, or maybe it really is just happening that much and we didn't anticipate needing that many resources. But the Senate side, I'm hoping, I've drafted, I can share with your office, a memorial to send to Congress. I'm keeping it focused on hate crimes. Hate crimes seems to be the most high contrast.
Okay.
And I have a body of evidence to suggest that they're eligible cases that didn't receive those charges. And the House side is where I'm focusing a little bit more midterm of what does a ground-up military civil rights act look like, doing a concept form with RJ on the Veterans Caucus, and then seeing where that goes. But the Senate doing a memorial could serve concurrently with Wyden's efforts in hate crimes to bring the DOJ to seek to begin enforcement. I think chipping away at some of the problems that's what I've been doing. And so those are the three things right now: the memorial from Oregon Legislative Assembly to Congress, the stand-up bill in the House side, and then the federal just hate crimes and DOJ, seeing what kind of difference we can make. One of those things is raising awareness of it. I had a really interesting conversation, I think, with Lewis. He was not convinced this is happening at all. Yeah, it was an interesting meeting, particularly within the military, the cultural dynamic between officers and enlisted officers. Like Representative Tran said herself, she had a really good experience, but she didn't want to discount mine.
Yeah.
And she's an officer, and I think she knows that I was an E5 when I got out. The vast majority of veterans spend less than 6 years in, don't utilize the VA healthcare, and there's a reason that a lot of veterans aren't identifying. And so once we can get, one of my priorities is getting the conversation into the mainstream. Manning has said that I can have 15 minutes during the Senate meeting in December for the legislative, which I think is a big thing.
Yeah.
But also on the House side, tracking the stand-up bill and what that looks like. It's never happened in our history because we never thought that it might have to happen, and yet here we are.
Will you get me, and I know time's cutting short, but will you get me the language once you have that?
Yeah, I can keep you on my little brain list.
Yeah, keep me on that.
Andrew.
Okay.
Okay.
But so that I can track that, I can be helpful with that on my side, maybe, but that doesn't mean that I can't be helpful with it.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Could I get a card for whoever I need to be in touch
Yep.
with?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go home and take a nap before pickup.
Hey!
Thank you so much.
Really great to meet you. Thank
Yeah,
you,
you too.
Logan. And
Yeah.
I hope this week was fruitful for you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm walking by.
I like it. Thanks, Logan.
Thank you.
Here is representatives.
Awesome.
Her policy director, Drew.
Okay.
This is Logan.
Hi. Nice to meet you, Drew.
And then
I'll have an email
and
for
then
you later.
mine is in the line.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.